Turn your PlayStation 4 into a retro gaming centre with RetroArch and play all the classic consoles and arcade games. Let me show you how. Hi and welcome to Bytes and Bits. The Sony PlayStation 4 is a fantastic console to own, even now in 2025. Two main reasons for that. First off then, the actual PlayStation 4 games themselves are incredibly good even today. There's some fantastic titles, some great games there that you can really enjoy. And again, with having been around for a few years, there's a really extensive games catalogue for it. But the second reason, and maybe even the more important one, is that it is incredibly easy to mod this console. So if you've been watching my channel, you'll have seen that I've been doing a number of modding episodes for this. And the latest episode then was the Blu-ray disc exploit. And again, all you're doing there is you're simply popping a little Blu-ray disc into the console, booting that up, and within 20 to 30 seconds, your console is actually hacked, and that's all there is to it. So really, the advantage of having a homebrewed PlayStation 4 is, of course, that first one where you can play your games from your legally obtained backup copies. You simply put them onto your hard drive, and you no longer need to insert your Blu-ray discs, and you can preserve those. Secondly then, as you've seen on my channel, if you've been looking at that, we can play PlayStation 1, PlayStation 2 and PlayStation Portable games on this device, all just simply by packaging up the games from their backup files and then loading them onto the PlayStation 4, so opening up an even more extensive library of games for you to enjoy. But in today's episode, what we're going to do is we're going to have a look at how we can use our PlayStation 4 to turn it into a retro console and retro computer emulation system. And we're going to do that using a system called RetroArch. So that's going to let you play sort of all the old Nintendo games, the NES, the SNES, and so on, the Sega consoles, Atari consoles, and a whole bunch of other ones as well. So let me show you how to load RetroArch on here and turn this into a retro gaming powerhouse. So we're going to need a few bits and pieces to get this project up and running. So first off then, we're obviously going to need a modified PlayStation 4. Now, if you haven't modded your console yet, then do check out my exploit videos just to see how easy it is. So my preferred method is the Blu-ray disc exploit, where you just have to pop a prepared Blu-ray disc into your console, and as I said, it's hacked in a few seconds. Now these discs can be picked up on eBay and other online shops for as little as £5, or if you've got your own Blu-ray writer, you can actually make one yourself very easily. So other than the console, really the only part you'll need then is an XFAT formatted USB drive, and this is just to transfer some files from your computer onto the console. So do make sure you get one of those ready for the next stages. So now we're going to need some software. So first we'll need to get hold of some homebrew applications. So for this, you're going to need to boot up your computer, and then, as I said, make sure you've got that XFAT formatted USB drive plugged in. So the first thing we need is the Homebrew Store. Now, if you have followed my exploit videos, you'll probably already have this on your PlayStation. But if not, head over to this web address here at the Package Zone, and in the top menu bar, click the Homebrew Store menu, and then download the version for the PlayStation 4. And all you need to do, this will come down as a package file, so just save that onto the root of your USB drive. Now the Homebrew Store makes it really easy to install the rest of the applications directly onto your console, but it does need your console to be connected to the internet. So if your console isn't connected, then you'll need to download the package files for the rest of the applications that we need. So you'll need to have a look on the package zone for the RetroArch unofficial package, the RetroArch Core Installer, and the PS4 Explorer, and that's Explorer just spelled XPLORER. And again, as I say, you can download all of those and then save those onto the root of your USB drive as well. So in this video, I'll actually be showing you how to install these apps directly from the Homebrew store when we jump onto the console, but I'll also, of course, talk you through how to get them installed if you haven't got an internet connection. So that's all the actual Homebrew apps that we're going to need. And next we need, of course, to get some games to play. Now, as usual, I'm not able to give you links to places where you can get these files, but needless to say, an online search will quickly help you out. And don't forget as well that my project page on the main bytesandbits.co.uk website allows me to give you more direct help, so please do go over there and check out that. And again, I'll put a link down in the video description. Now, on my USB drive here, I've got hold of a number of games for a range of systems, and I've saved them then into a games folder, and then inside that games folder I then have subfolders for each of the systems that I want to emulate. Now my advice is to unzip the console ROMs to get to the actual ROM dump files. Now, you can actually leave them as zip files, but quite often you'll find various hacked versions of games saved in the same archive. So extracting them lets you actually see what's in there, and of course you can then just copy across the real game files that you want to play. So for arcade emulation, we're going to be using MAME, and I've made a number of videos on how to work with MAME ROM sets. They are a bit more complicated, so please do have a look at those for more information. Now, for RetroArch, I do advise using a MAME 2003 Plus ROM set, which is also known as the 0.78 ROM set version. Again, the plus version of that. This gives us a very good quality of emulation. It doesn't put too much strain on the processor, and it does cover pretty much every game that you'd want to play. So again, I've got a few ROMs in here, not a full ROM set. Again, do check out my videos, as it does explain this a lot further. It is quite a big topic. Now, once we've got our game ROMs, it's also a good idea to grab hold of some BIOS files. Now again, an online search, if you search for RetroArch BIOS pack, that will turn up the files that you want. Now inside that, you'll find all of the BIOS files that RetroArch uses. And again, these are essential for some of the emulation cores. Now, if you're not sure which ones you need, then do check out the RetroArch documentation or the libretro documentation for the exact files for each system. And you then, of course, just need to copy these files over to your USB drive. But this time we're going to create a system folder on the root of our USB drive and then copy our BIOS files in there. Now, if I have a look in my system folder, I've got these files in here, and I will put a list of the ones that I'm using on the main project page on the bytesandbits.co.uk website. Now, with these ones, you'll be able to play all of the Atari, Nintendo, Sega, and Sony classic consoles. So pretty much everything you want to. Many of the other consoles don't need a separate BIOS file, but if you find that you get a warning or the system just simply doesn't boot, then that's a great indication that you might be missing one. So do then just check out the documentation for that particular emulator. So with our games and BIOS files and our package files on the USB drive, we're now ready to jump onto the console and get everything up and running. So on the PlayStation 4, you need to plug in your USB drive and then activate your mod. So once you've got Gold Hen up and running, pop up to the Gold Hen menu, go into your debug settings and the package installer, and you should see that you have some Homebrew apps sitting ready for installation. So first off then, we're going to install the Homebrew store. But after that, if you haven't got the internet, then of course you will need to then install both that RetroArch unofficial package and the PS4 Explorer package. But say if you have got internet, then we're going to use the Homebrew store to download those in a second. So once that Homebrew store is installed, if you're following me through on the download option, then we just simply need to open that up. So that's going to go through a number of setup screens and downloading some data, but eventually it'll drop you into the home page. Inside there, you should be able to see on the home page then, make sure you are on the Store Apps menu option. And the way this works here, use the D-pad to select what you want to see, and then of course the X button to open it and the B button to go back. And you'll know that the Store Apps menu option is selected because there'll be a little blue bar off to the right-hand side of it. So once you have the little blue bar there, select it, and that then should open up a menu, and from there you should be able to search for, and we just need to type in RetroArch. So once that search comes back, you'll see there's a number of apps appearing, and we only want 2 of those. So there's one that's called the RetroArch Unofficial. So if you find that one, it'll be one of the sort of black and grey and white RetroArch logos. Then select that one, and then click the X button to install it. So that will then go off and download and install that app for you and put it onto your PlayStation. So now we need to go back to our search results and then go across and find the RetroArch core installer. And again, similarly, just click on that and they'll install it. Now this is over a 1 GB download, so it is going to take a bit of time to download, so just let that run through. Finally then, we need to install the PS4 Explorer app. So again, go back to your search button, or if you go back to the home page, it's usually listed on there. But remember, it's PS4 and then it's Explorer. There's no E at the start of Explorer. So select that and install that as well. And that then, once those are in, if you go back out then to your main XMB, you should find our 3 applications sitting there. So first of all, we're going to run the actual RetroArch app. So select that on your XMB and boot it up, and just wait for it to start up and get you through to the main menu page. And what this is doing now, when RetroArch first starts, it creates a file structure on your hard drive where all of the files that it needs are going to go. And that's including our game files and our BIOS files. So let that just run through and set everything up. So once we actually get to the main menu, we need to come out of here just straight away. So use your D-pad to go over to the menu options, then scroll all the way down to the quit option. To select in RetroArch at this point, we need to use the circle button. So by default, RetroArch uses the circle button to select and the X button to go back. But again, we can actually change that in a little bit. But quit out of RetroArch. This should take you then back to your XMB, and RetroArch does not need you to close the application. It actually closes itself, so don't worry about the option button to close that. So next then, we're going to run the RetroArch core installer. So this, once you start that going, it simply copies over all of the actual core files that are needed by RetroArch. So these core files are actually the individual emulators that it's going to work with. So if you've used RetroArch before, you may well be used to downloading cores from within RetroArch, but because this is an unofficial release of RetroArch, it doesn't actually work with the official core downloader system. So we do need to install them manually through these update files. Now, this installer package we're installing at the moment will be the full set of cores that are available for the PlayStation 4 at the moment. Sometimes the developer does release new ones as they do it, but I don't think you're going to see many of those being released. But if there are, you'll simply need to just download the core package, the core installer again, and run it, and that will then install the new ones for you. But once that core installer has actually finished, we don't need that anymore. It's just a one-off run. So if we come back out to our XMB, just select it with the options button and then delete that from your system just to free up a bit of space. It does take about 1.5 GB, that application. So next, we're going to need to copy over our game and BIOS files so that then we have them actually on our hard drive. Now, you don't actually have to copy across the game files if you don't want. You can play them from your USB drive, but you will find it just makes things that bit easier. And of course, you don't then need to leave that USB drive attached. So I would, if I were you, just copy them across. So for this, we're going to use the PS4 Explorer app. So open that up. It might ask you some bits of setup about your firmware version and so on. So just go through that. If it asks you whether you want sandbox access or root access, we want root access. And this just simply gives us access to the whole filing system on our console. Now Explorer, obviously we don't have keyboard and mouse to work with here, so it relies on various control buttons and control button combinations to perform a lot of its tasks. If you want to see what those are, just simply click on the Options button and then select the Help option. Again, we're back to the normal sort of X to select, circle to go back scheme here. But if you select Help, that will bring you up a little diagram which shows you what all of the command buttons are. But again, there's only a few that we need to memorize. So back out of that, and we should now be back and looking at the root of our internal storage. So our USB drive is actually mounted as a folder in the MNT folder, the mount folder. If you're familiar with Linux, you'll understand this is what we're dealing with. But we can either navigate down to that and go through the menu system, or there is a quick button. So if you use the left and right buttons on your D-pad, that will then move you from the root folder across to your USB drives. So depending on which slot you've plugged your USB drive into, it'll either be on the left button or the right button. So once you get to your USB drive, you should then see your games folder that we made earlier sitting in there. So go down and select that, and you should then see your ROM folders. Now we want to select all of those to copy them. So there is a quick combination here. So if you do your R1 and R2 buttons, hold them in together. So those are your left and your shoulder button on the right and the trigger button on the right. If you hold both of those in, it should select all of the folders. You can then press the triangle button to bring up the file options, and we just need to select then copy. And that will then of course copy the folders onto our clipboard. So we now need to go and put them somewhere. So we're going to get back to our home screen or the root folder. So if you press down on your right analog stick, so that's the R3 button, then you will get straight back to the home screen. Or of course you can just press the back button, the circle button, to get us back out there. So we need to paste these game folders into the downloads folder in RetroArch. Now this is located, if we first of all go to the data folder, you'll then see that inside there is a RetroArch folder. And if you go inside there, you'll see all of the folders that RetroArch uses. And one of those, of course, is the downloads folder. So open that one up and then click the triangle button again. And here we can now paste in our game folders. So once those are copied over, you should now have a number of game ROM folders sitting in the RetroArch downloads folder. So next we need to copy over our BIOS files. So again, use the left and right D-pad buttons to locate your USB drive, and then navigate onto there to find the system folder. So again, inside that system folder, again, we can use the R1 and R2 combo to select all of their BIOS files, and then use the triangle button and copy them. And then we need to navigate back to that main RetroArch folder. So back up to the root, onto your data, into RetroArch, and then into the systems folder that should be sitting in there. And again, just press your triangle button and paste all of your BIOS files sitting in there. So we've now installed our games and we've installed our BIOS files. So we're ready to run RetroArch. So make sure you quit out of Explorer using your PlayStation button, and then you will need this one here to close that application. So just click the Options button on it and close down that application. Now, we do need now to make sure that you're connected to the internet, because RetroArch will need to update some of its files. An internet connection here, of course, is the easiest way to do it. You can go off and download these update files manually and then extract them and copy them across. I'll put more information about how to do that on the main project page. It's not very hard. It's just simply copying files into the correct folders again. So if we boot up RetroArch again, first off then, once we get to the menu, let's make life a little bit easier for ourselves and get those circle and X buttons swapped around. So we need to go across to the left-hand menu and down to Settings. Then on our main menu, Options down to Input. Remember, the circle button is the select button at the moment. So if we scroll down then, we should find an option for menu controls. And inside there, there's a swap, OK and cancel, and turn that to on. So from now on then, our X button is our select button and our circle button is the back button. So we can go back then up to our main menu. So our next task is to get RetroArch's internal databases all updated. So back up to our main menu and then across to our online updater. And then in there, you'll see there are a number of update routines here. So we just simply need to run through each of those in turn. So these files are basically its internal database of sort of games, how controllers work, cheats, and all those various things that allow it to run as a retro gaming system. So these aren't necessarily PlayStation 4 specific, which is why our unofficial app is able to download and use them. But just let them all run through. So once the updates have finished, you'll probably find that your screen looks a bit sharper. And again, that's because part of the assets that it downloaded was a better sort of screen layout, not the low resolution version. So our next task then is to go back out of here. And we want to go over to our settings. And we're going to come down to our input. And we're going to come down to our port bindings. And what this does, we're going to just make sure that the controls that RetroArch wants to use, so all the sort of left, right, and so on, are bound to our controller correctly. It probably is already set up, but it's worth just going through this just to make sure. So if we go into port 1 binds, we can see there that we have a device type here. So we want to use a RetroPad with analog, because again, our controller has, of course, got the buttons and the analog sticks. The analog to digital type, this lets us use an analog stick. So in a lot of games, we'll be using the D-pad. So a lot of the retro consoles did not have analog sticks. So obviously the D-pad will give us the left, right, up and down. But if you want, you can actually have the emulator use the left analog stick. So that will also then let you control the left, right, up and down with your analog stick. And again, that's in emulators where we didn't have an analog stick. So I'm going to say I would like to use my left analog stick for that. So the device index, of course, we have a PS4 controller plugged in. But I must admit, I do always like to go through the binding process. This is where we're going to make sure that all of the buttons on our controller are mapped to the inputs in RetroArch. So what it's going to do here is going to sort of talk us through which buttons to press. So we just simply need to press them as we go through. When we get down to the start and select buttons, I tend to use the trackpad, pushing the trackpad on the PlayStation 4 controller for select, and then the options button for start. So let me just run through these then. Okay, so that then just makes sure that we have the correct bindings for our controller. So I'm going to back out of this menu now. We're then going to go to something called our hotkey binds. So if you select that, so hotkeys are key combinations or button combinations that allow you to perform various options when you're in the game. And the most important of these is being able to get out of the game so you can play something else. So that is done through the menu toggle gamepad combo. Now, by default, that's set to start and select. So remember, when I was setting up my controller, I used the touchpad, pushing the touchpad to be my select button and the options button to be my start button. Now, I like to set up what's known as a hotkey using that trackpad. So I don't want to use the start and select for my menu toggle gamepad combo. So I like to actually change that down to holding in the start button for 2 seconds. But again, you can see there's lots of other different combinations you can use there. And really, this is all personal choice. But I'm going to use the hold down the start for 2 seconds. So when I'm in a game, if I hold down the start button or my options button, that will then bring up the in-game menu, which allows me to do various options and, of course, to actually quit out of the game. Now, we do want to then set up a hotkey. And what the hotkey does, all of these other actions, they are attached to various buttons on your keypad, but they're not activated until you're holding down the hotkey enable button. And that's what we need to set up here. So I like to set that to my trackpad. So if I click on that, and then hold down my trackpad, you can see that that sets it up. And obviously I already had got that set up. So what happens now is if I want to do any of these other actions, what I need to do then is in the game I hold in my trackpad, which is the hotkey button, and then press something else on the controller. So let's set one here for the quit RetroArch. So this will actually close down RetroArch completely and take it back to the XMB. So I like to set that to the X button on my controller. So if I select that with X and then select X again, so when I'm playing game, if I hold in my trackpad and press the X button, that will then quit me out of RetroArch and take me right back to the XMB. Now with the quit button, there's one other thing you can do, and that's at the very top of this. You can either have it quit immediately you do the hotkey combination, or you can have it say, in effect, are you sure you want to quit? And you have to press the quit button twice. So I tend to leave that on as well, just in case I hit it by mistake. Now obviously there's a whole lot of other button combinations you can use in here. One of the things which I would suggest you have a look at is the load state and save state are two very useful features that allows you to take a snapshot of your game when you're in the middle of playing it, and that lets you get back to that exact same spot in your game by just reloading that state. And it's very handy if you're playing a game where you have to get through levels and so on. As soon as you manage to get through a level and complete it, you can save a state there, so that as you go on to play the game and get killed, you can then come back to that just having completed that last state, last level, and just carry on having a go at it. So it's just very helpful, some features. But again, have a look through there and just sort of set them up as you want. But for now, I've got the ability now to quit out of RetroArch and to call up the menu system, which will let me do everything I want to do anyway. So that's all we need to do inside the hotkey bindings. So let's get back out to our main menu. So before we start actually loading in our games, there is one setting that we need to check. And to check this, I will actually boot up a game. So I can just come across here into my main menu, and I can just say I want to load some content. So content in RetroArch is an actual game. So if I select that, you can see there that we have our downloads folder is one of the predefined ones that RetroArch uses, and that's where we put our games in there. So I go in there, and if I come down to my Atari 7800 games, I can go and I can find Asteroids. So let's boot that up and see what it looks like. So we're into Asteroids. If I start a game, what we'll find is that it is actually going at an incredibly fast pace. If I do things, everything is very speeded up, and this is because our game, the RetroArch emulation, is not syncing with the speed at which the actual game is running. So we do need to check that out and fix it. So to get out of this, again, I set my menu combo as holding down my options button for 2 seconds. Remember, the default would be the trackpad and the options button. So if I hold that down for a bit, you can see I have a menu pop up. And this lets me do a whole load of things. So a lot of the things that were on those hotkeys you can actually do from the menu. But what I want to do is I want to close content, which will close the game and take me back to my main menu. So if I go to there, I'm in my quick menu, and if I go back using the circle button, it takes me back to my main menu. So I'm back out again. So to fix that speed issue, we need to go to the sync settings. So that's in the settings area, and then video, and then synchronization. And down the bottom of this, you'll see there is an option here to sync to exact content frame rate. So that will make sure that the frame rate in the emulator matches the frame rate that would have been on the console. So in the PlayStation 4, this just seems to be a setting that you have to put on. So I'm going to turn that on, and we should now find, if we come back out of here and go back up to our main menu and load our content and our Atari 7800 and Asteroids, we should find that our game is now just that little bit more playable. So we can actually play the game, and that is now running at the proper Atari console frame rate. So that fixes that, and that really then is us ready to actually go and get our game content setup. So let me close out of this one and back to our main menu. So we're finally ready to start loading in and playing some games. So you've already seen that we have this option to load content, and that lets you go off and find one of the games that you have copied across and boot that up. But we really want some sort of menu system where we can sort of browse through our games, and that's where the import content option comes into play down here. So if we come across import content and then go across and scan a directory, we can go off to our filing system, and we know that our games are in our RetroArch folder and downloads. So we've got all of our folders already set up here with each of our game files in. But what we can actually do, we can either individually scan them, or we can just scan this whole directory. So I'm going to scan the directory. What it will do, it will scan all the folders inside this directory, look at all the game files, and then create us some playlists for each of the systems that it finds. So let's see what happens when we do that. So that has scanned through all of those games. So let's come back out of here and back out to our main menu. And what we should find is we now have on this left-hand side, we have now a number of playlists that are the actual games that we want to play. So let's have a look and see what we've got. Looking at our Game Boy selection, then you can see it has scanned the games that we loaded into the Game Boy folder, and they're all now ready to run. So if I select one of these games, we get to the main sort of run menu, and you can see here there's a number of things we can do. We can rename it and so on. But if I try and run this, the first thing it comes up with here is which core do we want to use. So in the cores that were loaded through the core installer, it loads in a whole range of them, and some systems have more than one core available, and it's really saying to us here which core do we actually want to use, and it's going to ask us this on every single game. So really what we want to do is to set up a default core for this playlist. So this playlist, of course, is all of our Game Boy games, so we're going to select a core for that. And what we need to do is to make sure that each of our playlists, we select a default core, and that will then just mean that we don't have to keep selecting that every time we want to play a game. Now this setup is actually done in our settings, and if we go across, I'm actually going to go up, which will take me down to the bottom in a way, and you'll find there's an option there for playlists. So if I select playlists, we now want to go down to the very bottom of this list as well, and we want to click Playlist Management. And what this lets us do then is for each of our playlists, and because our playlists are actually built around a particular system, we can set a default core for that playlist. So if I come through into my Atari 2600, I can set a default core for that. And for this one, we want to use something called Stella. So if we can go down, we have the Atari 2600 Stella 2014. So if I select that, that has set a default core for this playlist. So when I run a game, it will automatically say that's the one I want to use. Same for my Atari 7800 and so on. If I come down to my Game Boy, which we've just been messing about with, if I select that one, I select a default core. So for this one, the core that we want to use is a bit down here. And we want to use, well, I'm going to use the Same Boy core, because that's the one that I like using for this. And what I'll do, I'll put a list up in a second here of all the different ones that you might want to choose. I'll also put that list on the project page that goes with this video. So again, do check the link down below for that, and that'll take you out, and you'll get this list listed there as well. But I'm going to select Same Boy for this one. So again, I would need to go through then when I come through here and set up the same for each of these. But let's just go and make sure that that is actually working for us. So if I come back out to our main menu, come down to my Game Boy, select my Donkey Kong World again, and say run that. And now, of course, it knows which core that I have told it to use, and we're straight into our game. So that's all working. So let me just go back to my menu. Just hold it in for 2 seconds. And close that content and back out. So that's everything we need to do to actually play our games now. But let's come across back down to our playlist here. So on this playlist here, you can see that as we go across to our games, there is an area on the right which should really have some sort of thumbnail, some of those little sort of pictures of our games, just to make our library look that little bit better. Now we can get hold of these quite easily. If we select a game, we get this sort of run menu. But down in there, you'll see there is a download thumbnails option. So if I click on that, that should go off and grab hold of a thumbnail. So if I come back out of that, you can see we now have our Atari 2600 Adventure. We have some box art for that. So we can, of course, go through and do that individually for each of the games, but it'd be much easier if we could actually do it as a whole. So if we come back out again and go up to our main menu and then our online updater, you can see there's an option in there to update the thumbnails in our playlists. So if I select that, we can then simply select our playlist and get it to load all of the thumbnails for all of the games in that playlist. So you can see there it's gone through and it has updated all of my Atari 2600 games. So if I come back out again to my Atari 2600 playlist and come in here, you can see we now have nice thumbnails for every single one of our games. Or, well, maybe not for that one there for some reason. Okay, so that lets you then tidy up and get lots of nice artwork to make your game library just look that little bit better, so as you go through you can actually see what's going on. So I'm going to go through and update the rest of mine, and then we'll go from there. So with all those playlists loaded, I have pretty much all the graphics I need now. Now it's not a perfect system, so my Atari 7800 ones didn't load at all in here. The Game Boy seem a bit hit and miss, mostly there, and so on. So again, it's not an exact science on this one, but it does give you a much nicer look to all of your games. So that's pretty much everything all set up. The only last thing I really want to go through is a couple of issues you might get. So as you've seen, this is it's not an official release of RetroArch. It's a project created by somebody just to try and get it onto the PlayStation 4. So there are a couple of issues with it. So if I go down to my Nintendo 64, I did set that up with the parallel core. But if I try and run a game in here, we do hit some problems. So that core is throwing up an error and throwing me out back into my main XMB. So if I come back into RetroArch, and if we come down to our Nintendo 64 again, one of the things, if you find that it doesn't work one way, we can obviously then try it another way. So if I come into my Mario Kart again, if I come down and set a core association, so I want to say, instead of using that parallelly N64 core, I'll try it with this Movement 64 Plus core. So let's see if that does any better. So we can see there that the game, I think, is booting up. Yes, and there we are into our Nintendo 64 game. I'm not sure if it's going to be running at full speed on our PlayStation 4, but if we go into that, we should find that we get it pretty much working. I did try this, and I think it did crash at some point in here. So let me just have a look and see if we can actually get it to a game. Let's see if it's going to go any further this time round, and see if it does that. So it's going to try and load up a course now. Let's get a bit further. So that's doing okay. And there it's crashed. Okay, so you can see there that setting up different cores can make a difference, and it can get you a bit further into games. Sometimes it will run on one core and not on another. But as I say, do be aware that this is not a perfect system. The other one then, I have loaded in some PlayStation games here. So if I come in and try and play one of these, if I try and play Crash Bandicoot, if I try and run that, so I'm running on a core, but again, this is where I was saying our BIOS files. If you don't have the correct BIOS files loaded in, then quite often it will tell you which ones you do need to use, or at least you can go off and check the documentation to see which one you do need. So I'm going to see if I can get that loaded in, and then we'll try this game again. So I've copied that file across to my system folder, and if we now try to run our Crash Bandicoot, let's see if it picks up on that. And there we go, it's booting up into our game. So let's hopefully see if that runs correctly. And you can see it's starting to go through its setup screens. It's obviously going very slowly. So again, PlayStation 1, Nintendo 64, the PlayStation 4 is probably not quite powerful enough to run those, definitely not at full speed. The PlayStation 1 though, do make sure you check out my proper PlayStation 1, PlayStation 2 and PlayStation Portable emulation on the PlayStation 4. That's as a separate video, and that uses Sony's own emulators to repackage the games so that they do play correctly on the PlayStation 4. So have a look at that video as well. But let's come out of this then and back to our main menu. So that should give you everything you need to know to get up and running with a whole range of retro consoles on your PlayStation 4. So I hope you found this video interesting. If so, please do click that like button and subscribe to the channel for lots more gaming, modding, electronics and making projects. I look forward to seeing you again very soon, and bye for now. Thanks for watching. Make sure to check out this video and this playlist for loads more projects and tutorials just like this one. Have fun, and I'll see you soon.